Now, let's talk about how this is managed in commercial ships. By this, I mean those large vessels. Here, I'm going to show you a photo of them. Here you can see the commercial vessels, friends. It's an immense amount of containers we can see there. As we just saw in the previous image, these enormous vessels are used to connect international trade due to their low transportation costs. Although the transit time is a bit long, close to 28 or 35 days, its reliability is good for any transportation of goods, whether legal or not so legal. But here I am interested in explaining a bit about the illegal way. For years, this method has been a favorite among the great okrans of the Ficatra, starting to camouflage the losky with the merchandise, sometimes in bulk, other times attached to the merchandise through chemical procedures. All this in order to pass the extremely rigorous maritime customs controls. If the customs personnel are not on the payroll of the Okran, the first filter is to pass these procedures, visual inspections, x-rays, and sometimes even dogs, highly trained to find gastro. Once that filter is passed, the agents proceed to seal the containers with special seals and locks, which can no longer be opened to put in or take out the gastro, if the idea was to disembark. And in open sea, boarding the ship to load the container with gastro. Well, let me tell you, it will be difficult for you, because if you tamper with these seals, the customs agents receiving the ship would notice, and you would have serious problems. And I say, it is difficult. But what you think? As always, the Okran is one step ahead of the government, and, of course, it is possible to do it using methods that I cannot reveal, because there are people who are still using it, and as far as I understand this method, it has only been used for a short time, some 2 or 3 years, and I take this opportunity to greet and thank my Ecuadorian friends. I send you a big hug. Sometimes they take a gamble. What do I mean? That the owner or owners of the merchandise make the transfer without informing the authorities, and as some Okrans say, they leave that job to luck. Referring to that, it's only going to succeed if they have good luck. And this has caused thousands and thousands of loskies to be seized at international ports over time. But this is talking about losses. And since we all always like to win in these dealings, you have to have an arrangement with the customs agencies and the maritime police groups of the country where the goods are going to be unloaded. So they pretend not to know and let these thousands and thousands pass. Just imagine in America. The groups that protect these shipments are paid between $250 and $300. So do the math and you'll see why it's so easy to corrupt the maritime authorities. Of course, not everyone falls. There are highly trained individuals who do not let these actions go through. But those who do fall, they are responsible for receiving the sealed container with the serial number provided in the cargo documents to precisely identify which merchandise needs to be unloaded, opened, and delivered to the owners. Although this method, having the right or bribed contacts, is wonderful, it is also prone to thefts, as on one occasion during a shipment of several tons coming from Ecuador and destined for Spain, there was a surprise upon arrival for the customs officials in charge of unloading the container. They reported that something had happened because the container was empty. Well, not empty. The legal cargo to flag it was there. What was missing were the losky, and no more to say. With that, they began investigating and looking for those responsible. On that occasion, the thieves were lucky and weren't discovered, which meant a loss for the organization of the millennium. But the transaction was done again, and what was lost was recovered. Another method we are going to talk about is using fishing boats like this one that I'm going to show you. Here we can see the fishing boat, friend. Well, the freight on these vessels is more common on routes through the Caribbean Sea to go from Colombia to Central and North America, and another route through the Atlantic Ocean to go from other countries like Panama, Venezuela, Guyana, or of course Colombia to reach Spain, Portugal, or Morocco. In these ships, the process is more similar to land freight, as they have hidden compartments to conceal the product, since these ships are always under the authorities' radar and have to dock in the town. But it depends on the plan and logistics to know if the ship docks loaded or if it is unloaded in the open sea, using smaller boats for this. These boats can also be used as tugs to carry what are called parasites. Let me explain what this is. A parasite is an organism that lives thanks to another organism, meaning it gets its resources to survive from the organism called the host. For example, intestinal worms. But in our topic, which is the ocran, the parasite is a device that is tied to the ship so that it can be pulled along. Sometimes they have a mechanism to release it, in case the ship's crew feels in danger and wants to get rid of the problem, as they say in Mexico. Here, I am going to show you a video of one of these parasites. Well, here we could see the shape of these parasites. I just need to mention that these parasites can be made in different ways. The first would be, as I said, towing or pulling with a kind of rope, and the second would be attaching or welding that structure to the vessel. It makes assembly and disassembly a bit more difficult, but it also helps that if by chance a government radar bumps into it, only a point is visible. If they send divers to inspect the underside of the vessel, they might not notice the presence of the parasites. If they are well made, they could even be mistaken for the hull of the ship. Also, if you saw the shape of the parasite like a cone at the tip, this obviously serves to reduce resistance against the water, the ingenuity of the ocran at its best. Although I think this type of transport is more used in large commercial ships, I realized I didn't mention this when I talked about commercial ships. But here, this one I couldn't skip. This way of using parasites is more economical, as often even the crew doesn't know they're carrying this extra load. And how do the telcars do it? You may wonder. Well, it's simple. The answer is corruption. They find an operator at Port Customs who can get you the navigation plan or vessel manifest to know everything about that vessel, such as the route the ship will follow, from its port of origin to its destination. You can also see coordinates there, estimated arrival times if they have stopover points, and even the expected weather conditions. They could also use a cargo manifest to know the goods that the ship is transporting, as well as its origin and destination. But besides that, it details the cargo, such as the weight, the type of cargo, and any type of clarification that needs to be made to move said cargo. I mean, these customs officials, they have the entire itinerary of the vessel, and with the details that might be needed. So with this information, the Okrans can decide to place the parasite just a few hours before the scheduled time for the ship to set sail. And they would already have everything ready at the destination port, or would already know approximately the date they would arrive, so they could be prepared to conduct a quick operation, remove the parasite, and take out their merchandise, and the crew would never know about the extra cargo they were carrying. To prevent this type of trafficking, many ports use divers to inspect the hull of the ship for parasites. A very demanding job since there is always ship traffic in the ports. But of course, it's impossible to inspect all of them. And with the corruption in the ports, as I mentioned, it becomes 10 times more complicated for the authorities to stop this. On one occasion, Arturo Beltran carried out an operation with this method. Everything was going perfectly. At least 400 loskis from Peru were put on the ship. Loskis needed to create the famous stone. Everything was carefully calculated, as on many previous occasions. But while in international waters, the ship had a breakdown and stopped, causing route changes of the ship. Likewise, the discovery of these 400 loskis. Of course, Arturo lost them, but a friend who was part of that operation told me it took him longer to request another 400 loskis than to complain about the loss. You see Arturo and his unstoppable work pace. Let's move on to another method. This is the use of underwater drones like this one I'm going to show you here. That we can see, friends. Well, I think this technique is the newest one mentioned on the list. There's not much information about these devices, only that they can carry from 100 to 200 loski, but they are not capable of traveling long distances. In fact, the only ones I have seen were confiscated in Spain. That photo I showed you, and they use them to cross this section that I will show you here. Look, friends, here they arrive on the shores of Morocco and here. Well, they can also reach Spain. But here the most viable option is to take them through Gibraltar to the coasts of Spain, and here they already have entry to other coasts of Europe. You can reach Valencia, Barcelona, and here, as you can see, up to Italy. For this project, these devices are the ones they use. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to hear of anyone using these devices. I only know they exist. We are already in the final stretch of the episode, and it's time to tell another story about those from Sinaloa. I left this one for the end, because as you will see, I didn't know where to place it, because these cases are common since they happen often, but remain rare due to their way of operating. Because on one occasion, the job was planned to use a boat to go again from the Colombian coasts to the Mexican ones, specifically to Tapachula in the state of Chiapas, the reliable route, and I will show you a picture of a similar boat. There you can see the boat, friends. Get ready for the story in a moment. Well, with that image in your head, now I can tell you what was on board in this vessel. Well, there were a couple of people with their fishing gear, water, food, and gasoline, and some coolers to store the catch. And you might wonder, Where were the goods or the merchandise? Well, that's the curious part. The boat was made of the product. So it wasn't that they were transporting something illegal. They were transporting themselves in something illegal. The process for this is difficult, as it combines chemical knowledge and the fabrication and manufacturing of materials. But here, I will try to explain the thing in broad terms. First, the object must be created. For this, the powder base is mixed with epoxy resin or adhesives used for manufacturing structures with fiberglass. This way, the structure integrates with the material. Then this fiberglass is applied in layers on molds of the desired design, so that when it hardens, the result is the mold. Once the material has hardened, it is usually painted to make it look real. With the boat, obviously, the engine is mounted and it sets sail to its destination. In this case, the boat arrived at its destination in Tapachulas, Chiapas, without any issues. A parcel service was hired there, a full trailer to take it to Culiacan, where it also arrived at its destination without any issues. Upon arrival, when the Telcar workers were unloading the boat, the driver asked a somewhat out-of-place question. He said, "Listen, this trip is really strange. The panga is heavily loaded because the shipping costs the same as a new boat, and the Telcar workers could only deny it and laugh nervously. They already took the boat to a warehouse to start cutting it up. For this, they laid out a tarp on the floor to avoid wasting even the last gram. And those who were cutting it wore full suits to cover themselves completely, with gloves and taped gloves, masks, everything, and protection to prevent the fiber from coming into contact with the skin because it causes too much irritation. It was like having itch powder thrown on you, but in exaggeration. After having the pieces cut, they were put into a kind of grinder or special blender to turn them into powder. And with that turned into powder, now the fiber is separated from the powder base, and a specialized chemical process begins. First, the use of solvents like acetone that can dissolve the resin without affecting the powder is how it's separated. Afterwards, another filtration process is carried out where, after dissolving the material, the fiberglass and other waste are filtered out to finally obtain the powder base. This process, here, I mentioned it in a few words, but it's a long process, and an expert is required to achieve it 100%. In these cases, the ones in charge of doing it were a pair of Colombian technicians who were experts in this. But anyway, once they had the powder base, which would yield 500 losky, they would then start working with that same base and manage to cook a little over 600 losky. You know, to always earn more. This is how they achieve this feat, which still impresses me to this day, even though this method has been seen in many places. For example, I have seen it in shows like Airport Security, where they try to sneak anything using methods from furniture to toys or decorations. Really, it's something incredible. Not knowing that the sculpture you bought in South America is actually made of gastro, something hard to comprehend. On other occasions, the same process was used, but now with some sheets like acrylic, quite large and thick. Those were indeed some of 1 ton base, because there were several. And well, friends, we have reached the end of this episode. 1,000 thanks for watching it until the end, and also 1,000 thanks to those who watched this episode after Wednesday, when the second part comes out. Thanks to everyone for the support. Until now, we have started sending out the raffle prizes. We just need to contact 2 people to finalize the details. But with the others, we're catching up. Apologies, but the vacation left us tired here. Some of the winners preferred their prize in the form of money, and that is respected. And well, it also helps us and makes life easier. So that's how it will be done. Well, once again, thank you, friends, for all the support, a hug, and we'll see you in the next episode. and remember that the unique and real narrative of the world of Okron can only be found here. A hug again, and see you next time.